and I want to thank you for your hard work. And I'd also like to acknowledge our co-chair, Mayor Ed Lee, who has joined us. And Mayor Lee, would you be kind enough to share a few words with us?
Thank you, Superintendent. Good afternoon, everyone. This is an exciting time. Years ago, we probably would have guessed as to whether or not we would ever come together as an entire city. Community-based agencies, nonprofits, educators, school district, and multiple departments that all of us and all of our constituents end up touching, but never really having an opportunity to align and coordinate with the same goals. And for a number of years, our public said, this is a pretty good place called San Francisco, but so many things are disjointed, yet we have great intentions. We want to do better. We love our children and our families, but is it our systems that are keeping us apart? And for me, who spent a few years suing the city and county of San Francisco in my younger years, I found out when I started working for the city that there's tremendous talent within the city. It's just that the systems kept this down, kept this from working more collaboratively. And so this outcomes framework that we're really talking about and making sure we can adhere to is an incredible result of the voters' intent. Let's lessen the barriers to success for everybody. Let's talk through and make sure that all of the agencies that we fund, that we want to do, that the CBOs are funded for, that we have a more united interest in the outcomes that we want for our kids and our families. That's what we are going to spend quality time doing. And I kind of agree with Superintendent Carranza that the presentations by the departments is pretty refreshing to hear, because usually it's only discussed in the daily work of the school district's strategic plan in this room. And now we're able to hear from departments what their intent are, what they want to do. And in holding everybody accountable, we wanted to make sure that we have a framework to discuss our goals as an entire city of all these participants. And tonight, we want to also put life into these frameworks by beginning with real life stories. Stories like Reggie Danielson's story about how he grew up in this city and what he encountered as someone who's gone through the entire touching of different parts, and how maybe through his story suggests that we can do even better and more, and use these words like integration and alignment with some real life stories ahead. And then followed by Reggie's presentation, we'll have Dr. Scolari again help point us in the right direction and continue doing so, as her focus will be to keep us in the right direction. But I wanted to hear from Reggie first, and so are we ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's get on. Real stories.
Thank you, Mayor, for that welcome.
You gotta push the button.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for that warm welcome, Superintendent Dr. Scolari, and all of you who are here under the sound of my voice. I appreciate this opportunity to share my story. It's an honor to be able to share my story tonight. My family has been in San Francisco for 3 generations. My grandparents were attracted here during the migration period, worked on the shipyards and whatnot. And our families went through some interesting twists and turns. Unfortunately, both of my parents were addicted to heroin. And as a result, my life in early childhood was between 2 very unique households. One, my grandparents were very religious in a very stable household, and the other, my parents, who were addicts and lived in the Sunnydale housing projects. My grandfather was a preacher at the St. Mark Institutionary Missionary Baptist Church on Valencia. And my grandmother, she pretty much tried to give me all that she could, guidance and encouragement, wanted me to always stay in school. But however, I did not always have the fortune to be with them and have that support. The other world that I knew with my parents was pretty difficult. For most of my life that I can remember, my mom and dad were addicted to heroin. I spent most of my upbringing in the Sunnydale housing projects, as I had mentioned before. It was a place that we called home. My mom used prostitution. She used forgery and other means, illegal means, to support her addiction, as well as my father. My uncles, my father's brothers, were also pimps, and their perception, the perception that I had, was access to success meant access to a lot of cash and drugs. And I remember my first time doing drugs with my dad. He sat down and smoked a joint with me when I was probably 7 years old. The neighborhood where I grew up, because my parents did have an income at one point and started working for Muni, I was often pressured and bullied for money and drugs in my neighborhood. So I could say that I did not feel safe in my neighborhood in the Sunnydale housing projects. At a very young age, I started carrying weapons to so-called protect myself. I was an only child, and eventually I brought one of those weapons to school, which led to my first encounter with the juvenile justice system, and also would be the beginning, I didn't know at that time, of a long history with the justice system. And so my mom and dad were in and out of incarceration due to weapons and charges and forgery, which I mentioned. And most times my grandparents would come and get me when it was available, when it was an opportunity for them to bring me into their home and to try to give me a safe, stable life. I had my own interactions within the jail system, and it's a pretty overwhelming story, so I'll try to summarize it. It happens over a 15-year period in my life. I became a drug abuser, the member of a gang in the Potrero Hill neighborhood, and a perpetrator of violent crimes. I've seen 7 prison convictions for carrying weapons and possession for sale of drugs. I was shot 2 times in violent incidents and still have a bullet lodged in my body to this very day. However, there is a bright light to my prison experience. I was exposed to many programs, which eventually turned my life around, including Roads to Recovery at the San Francisco Sheriff's Department and Resolve to Stop the Violence Project, which I'm currently employed with right now, working with youth 18 to 25 to interrupt the cycle of violence. It was there that I finally got the mental support and therapy that I needed in my life. It was difficult. My family relationship was difficult and very unstable. I was exposed to violence, particularly my mom's temper, when she was not able to meet her physical dependencies on the heroin, on the drug heroin. And at those times, I would experience the greatest extent of verbal abuse and abuse, physical abuse, sometimes resulting in broken bones and even unconsciousness. When I reflect back to when I was a little boy, I felt very alone. I have questions that come to mind. Why is it that anyone didn't see my suffering in the school system? Why is it that anyone didn't pull me aside and say, hey, what's going on, little man? Things of that nature. I felt like if I would have had someone maybe to talk to at that point, that it could have made a big difference in my life. When I brought weapons to school, maybe someone could have simply asked, are you okay? Do you feel safe? Why would you bring a weapon to school? I've always been a pretty polite kind of guy, but it was like an inconsistency for me to be carrying weapons of that nature. So it may have made a difference if someone would have picked up on that. And so I didn't feel engaged in my community. I did not feel engaged in my school. Many of my peers now, as I look back, are incarcerated for things like murder. Many of them, friends that I have died on the streets, street crime. So that was the track that I saw, and those were the guys who were in the classrooms that I was in at that time. And so for Goal A, I did not live in a safe and nurturing environment. It was very chaotic and unstable for me. Earlier, I mentioned that I grew up in the Sunnydale housing projects, and though we were not homeless, there were infestation of pests. Right, there were roaches that was very common, and even when we tried to fumigate our apartment, because the other apartments were not fumigated, then they would very quickly come back. So that wasn't always an ongoing problem. We had some access to food stamps and welfare, and that was kind of nice, to have some food in the house from time to time. Even though my parents' addiction, there was like feast or famine. There was times that we had meals, and then there were times where I kind of had to fend for myself and figure out how I would be able to sustain myself. But I did stay with my grandparents off and on. I do have memories of wonderful cooked meals. My grandmother's a great cook. She's from Louisiana. And so, yeah, she has that Cajun background with food. And I actually appreciated having the opportunity to feel safe and have a stable environment, know that someone cared when I came home. There was a curfew there. And even though, like a child may, want to eat gummy bears for dinner every night, and that's something that they may want to do, but we know that that's not healthy. So I did appreciate being with my parents like every child would want to be, but at the same time, it was really not healthy for me at that time. So now reflecting on GOSI, I'm not sure, but I think my mom used drugs with me while I was pregnant. I'm pretty sure. My birth was very difficult. I was born with pneumonia, spots on my lungs, spiral meningitis, and I think a lot of it was due to her not getting prenatal care and possibly drug usage. Let me see. So moving along, my parents were eventually on 3rd Street. There was a program which gave out, I think it was maybe $15 or $20 for people to be tested for the HIV, for the disease. And they, at that point, did get tested and found out that they were HIV positive. And I think that was in the early 90s that both of my parents told me that they were, in fact, infected with the HIV AIDS. So that was very difficult for me, that they found out in that particular way, kind of, let me know in a very kind of direct way. And I think that at that point, there was depression in our family. There was depression for me. I don't remember them getting any counseling. I certainly did not get any counseling. And I could say that we were in a sense in survival mode. Overall, we suffered as a family, I think, from depression. My mom, I believe, she told me she used because she was covering up related troubles in her past childhood, possible molestation. I think that because of her addiction and behaviors that she learned, she was never quite fully able to tell that story, but continued to suffer from it. At one point, I can remember feeling very suicidal. And at one point, being involved in gangs to me was possibly a hope and desire for me that someone would put an end to my suffering. I really can honestly say that. So regarding having access to caring adults, I didn't really have anyone to look up to at that particular time. There was no one that looked like me that I was able to really admire. The closest things were teachers, yet I didn't connect with anyone specifically because, they weren't a lot of African American teachers when I was coming up in the Sunnydale area. The leaders I saw were pimps and drug dealers that looked like me in the projects, and the things that they done were they used violence and manipulation as a means of getting their needs met. As a kid, I don't remember participating in any preschool or early care programs. However, when it came to school, I do remember that I loved to read, and in fact, it was one of the things that I found myself to be good at, and often got reprimanded by some of my early school teachers for helping other kids and not doing my own work. But with my grandparents in my life, I went through various private schools. They did do their best to try to supplement what was going on in my parents' life. Jumped around from various public schools in San Francisco. My attendance was inconsistent, good when I was staying with my grandparents. And my grandparents pretty much stepped into my life when my parents were incarcerated, as I said before. I did have an opportunity to attend Reardon High School, where I graduated with my grandparents' support. Also went on to continue to City College, and I felt at home at City College. It was really the first learning institution that I felt at home, at least higher learning. I got a lot of support also. I think in terms of building character at Reardon, which was the first time I exposed to character, but City College was probably the first place where I really learned a deep sense of community. And so there I found my way to the Second Chance program after formerly being incarcerated. Found a bit of family there, and even was part of starting a philosophy club there. Found a particular interest in philosophy. I graduated and transferred to San Francisco State. But there I felt a little intimidated. It was my first time being in larger classes, and I remember walking into a philosophy class and seeing folks looking nothing like me in terms of color or class. I felt lost and disconnected. Eventually dropped out and fell back into crime and drugs. I also lost my parents around that time, and very close, probably within a month and a half of each other. In terms of career, when I was a kid, I got into trouble for being out of my seat. I mentioned that, of course. And that helped to open up to me that maybe teaching might be something that I want to do later on. And so during my incarceration, I was incarcerated for drugs, and at this point I was approaching the age of 40. And while I was in jail, some mentors who had stayed very close to me came up and let me know that it was probably time to do something else. This was a low point in my life. At this point, I was in one part of the jail system. My son was in another part, and it was just like overwhelmingly just too much. It was the time. People said, well, where did your change come? I felt that change came with the opportunity for me to be really vulnerable, to cry and shed tears that I probably needed to have done many years before that. But actually, I was able to at that point because they were showing me unconditional love. These mentors are able to cry and even lament in a jail where that's not, the normal thing to do, or even always the best thing or safest thing to do in jail, where, it's kind of hyper vigilant. But that was my meltdown. That was my change. And so at that point, that's where I actually said, I do have an addiction. I do have a problem with violence, and I'm ready to get some help. So I started to enroll in these programs that I mentioned before, Roads to Recovery, where I successfully graduated. And then I continued on to the Sheriff's Department at the time, under Sheriff Hennessy, offered an internship, and I'm not sure if they still have that. But it was an opportunity to let the Sheriff's Department know, people who were in programs and doing well, once they got released, to let them know what your interests are. And they would pay you, a minimum of maybe $10 an hour, 20 hours a week, to go and do something that you like, an internship, and hopefully that would lead into some kind of employment. So at this point, while in this program and connected with the Sheriff's Department, USF formed a collaboration there, and they have a performance group that comes in every semester, and they do work with the Sheriff's Department. So collaborations are really nice. And so in this particular case, I was asked if I would be willing to participate in a theater project. And this theater project, me, myself, and four other individuals, three of which were formerly incarcerated, one which was a USF student, we had the opportunity to write our life story and actually perform it at the USF Theater. That performance, I was told, I don't think it's documented, but I was told that we performed at USF on the Hill there in the theater for 3 nights, and all 3 nights that performance sold out. And we were told that more people of color attended that performance than ever before at that campus. So we're really excited about that. And it was a turn in my life for sure, because that led to me having an opportunity to later on meet Father Prevet, who was then the president of that school. And in meeting Father Prevet, he allowed me to come in his office. He's not the most easiest man to contact. His schedule is surely very busy, but he made time to meet with me as an individual. He came and seen the play. And I'll never forget that meeting because he gave me permission to be successful at his university. He said, you know what, do your best, enroll, and if you have some, issues around electives or something like that, come and talk to me, and we could talk about work experience. But greater than that, it was like, here was someone who really cared and seen me, and there was an opportunity for me to reconnect with my dreams that had pretty much kind of fell by the wayside along the ways of incarceration and hardships in my life. And so that was a turning point for me. And in the process of that, I caught the theater bug. So I've been in 4 performances since then. I've traveled over to Germany. I've been in a World Peace Conference in Prague. All of this was opened up to me by a collaborative effort between the Sheriff's Department and USF and the community-based organization that I work for now, Community Works. And so I just caught the bug. I was on fire. You'd be held back from your dreams for so long. So I got into this accelerated bachelor's program there, and I completed my undergraduate degree in organizational behavior and leadership. And right after I finished, I said, you know what, man, I've been waiting for so long. There's a master's program. I got right into that. So I completed the organizational development degree, my master's degree in the School of Management at USF. And that wasn't enough. After I got that, I said, I got a taste for it. If I'm going to start, I've always went all the way. I'm going to go all the way. So I enrolled into the doctoral program of organizational leadership, and that's where I met Dr. Scolari, who is my professor, and that's part of the reason why I'm here today.
You got it there?
Thank you, Reggie, for sharing your story. I think everybody in the room is inspired by it, and thank you for organizing it within the framework so we can connect to each one of the measures and the goals. So just a question for you. If you could retell your story, and if we could do it all over again, if we were, for the new Reggies that are in San Francisco now, if we can recreate their story, are there things that you would change, and what would you do differently? That you have all these leaders in the room that could benefit from hearing your perspective. So how would you redo it?
So, thank you for asking that, Doc. So I have a dream job in mind. So, my goal has always been to find little Reggies, to put myself into higher learning and to look for that connection. Maybe someone has a dream deferred, and to not necessarily judge them by the record or their background, but to just kind of look at them and connect with their passion. So that's something that I would like to do, is maybe develop that program, connect with some of the higher learning institutions. And although I can't change my story, I believe that I can work diligently with that kind of support to change other people's stories. So that's my life mission. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing, Reggie.
Thank you.
Mayor,
I just got to tell you, I got a little weepy over here, okay? You're exactly the example that we try to hold at the very center of the work that we do, not only in the city, but also in the school district. The story of redemption, the story of struggle, the story of overcoming. It is just so powerful, and I want to invite the future Dr. Reggie to come and share your story with some of our students. We'll reach out to you because they need to hear your story. We got a date? We'll make it happen?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make it happen. And I think more than anything, that's the kind of story that's grounded in what the framework is talking about, and it motivates us to hold on to what has contributed to our successes and your successes. It's a reflection of how we all can do better. And we all can make sure that we're raising Reggies in the city and county of San Francisco. So with that, let's get back to business. Let's turn to a discussion and a vote on the outcomes framework. So let's open it up for discussion, and I'd like to invite Jennifer Tran and Dr. Scolari to weigh in where it's needed.